It's the end of July, and there's still free agent signings. I don't know who we have to thank, but I think hockey gods exist.
Yeah, they've been pretty good to the pod so far, and we're quite thankful of that.
We over the past, I guess, a week or so, I don't know what it is about Finnish and Swedish players, but that's all we've been hearing about. So let's just start ripping through these guys. They're all young, all RFAs. Let's start with Kappo Kakko. I think you have a little bit to say about him.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that bad of a deal. It's 2.1 million by 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about Kappo Kakko first, I mean, like, we'll call a spade a spade. He's low-key a bust of a second overall pick, but he is not a bust of a hockey player, and I think those are two different things, right? I mean, when you try to take a guy second overall, like, I'm thinking in my head that comes to mind, like, Landeskog, Hedman. I think Barkov went number 2
Barkov
as well.
was second or third. He was high.
Right? Like, you want, at a minimum, your second overall pick to be in the top 6, but you probably want him to be a first-line winger or center or a first-pairing defenseman. And I think Kappo Kakko right now, especially in the playoffs last year, was on the kid line, which was the bona fide third line of that team.
Third line, yeah.
I mean, yeah, so I still think he's going to turn into like a top 6 player. And I mean, even if he remains kind of a bust of a second overall pick, if he can be a mainstay in the third line, I mean, at 2.1 million AAV by 2 years, I think this is kind of a prove me deal, right?
For sure. Yeah, I think it absolutely is a prove me deal. A little bridge deal, 2 years. The cap might go up if he has a good couple seasons. He will get paid, but he has to actually go out and do it.
Like, at worst, if he remains the player that he is, 2.1 million isn't terrible for a guy with a projected WAR. I think at 60 in the 60th percentile among all forwards. I mean, he's pretty good two-way. I have here from Jay Fresh and Top Down Hockey. He's in the 81st percentile in expected value of defensive metrics for forwards, so he can play both ways. And I think that's one of the reasons why Gerard Gallant loved that kid line, because they were good at both ends of the ice during the playoffs. I mean, offensively right now is clearly where everyone talks about that he isn't up to par with the standards of a second overall pick. He's sub 40th percentile. I mean, he should be better. This is his 4th year, right?
Yeah, he'll be entering his 4th year. I guess the only not only silver lining, but I guess a source of optimism is that he'll probably be playing with Panarin and Trocheck.
So that's one thing I wanted to talk about too that worries me a little bit about Kappo Kakko. I think Top Down Hockey says that in terms of where a player ranks percentile-wise with respect to who they're playing with on their own team, he's in the 90th percentile, which means he's playing with some of the best line mates that any forward is in the league.
It makes sense.
And he still isn't putting up points that are to par with like what he should be doing. With Andrew Kopp leaving next year, he might get a chance in that second line.
I think as of right now, that's where he's slotted because their winger depth isn't the best, right? So I think he's going to be there.
I hope for Kappo Kakko's sake that he picks it up. I mean, let's say this year he puts up 60 points. Next year he puts up 65. This 2-year deal then bridges him to, I still think they'll have him in RFA status, and then they can sign him to a deal that works for both the organization and for him as a player. And I'm hoping for the best. But right now, he's played just under 160 games in his career and only has 58 points and only 26 goals. Like, that's just not good enough.
No, it's not.
So we'll see.
He's got a couple years to prove himself, and we'll see what happens. Someone who's actually in this similar boat, I think maybe a little more established as a top 6 forward, is Jesse Puljujarvi. Signed a 1-year deal at $3 million. I think this is actually a pretty decent deal at first glance. He was an analytical darling this season. Like, the analytics on him seems to suggest he's a pretty great player. He's top 15 percentile and top 15% rather in both offense and defense, according to Jay Fresh and those graphs that he produces. And he also had some success with McDavid, which is nothing to sniff at all. I know we always joke about, like, I could play with McDavid, I'm just going to put my stick on the ice and go to the net. But in reality, it's not that easy because you have to be able to keep up with him. First of all, you also have to be able to think on a similar level and also understand their tendencies. And it's like Kunitz playing with Crosby. No one gave him credit, but that's actually a really difficult thing to do. I think it's similar with McDavid. He didn't play with McDavid as much once Kane signed, of course. But even if he's playing with Draisaitl, they've actually had some success together. Playing together, they had a 58.3 Corsi 4 percentage, which is solid. It's good. But when Draisaitl played without Puljujarvi, his Corsi 4 percentage dropped to 47.6, which is still fine. It's like even, but I don't think that says that Draisaitl is a bad player. I just think it shows that Puljujarvi's good at complementing some of these really good players. So I think if you can get him, get him for one more year at $3 million, and hopefully you can lock him down long term if he has a good season, because I think he's an important player.
No, I completely agree, and I don't know why, but for some reason Oilers fans just don't like Puljujarvi.
I don't know why. It's almost like, I know he's not the same player as Willie. It reminds me of all like people in Toronto who've been trying to trade Willie since he got drafted.
I think it also has something to do with the fact that he was taken 3rd overall, had a bad start to his career, and then went to Finland, right?
He went to Finland a couple seasons ago.
Yeah, and I mean, he like credit to him, like that like stint in Finland made him a much better player. He came back and he can compete at the NHL level now. Yeah. I think one of the reasons why Edmonton Oilers fans aren't particularly happy with this signing is not because the term and the value aren't good, but because it means that they might not be able to sign Kaler. His name's Kaler Yamamoto. Yeah. And Oilers fans are on the opposite ends of the spectrum with respect to Yamamoto. Yeah, they love him.
He's like a little gritty guy. Like, you love to cheer for guys like that. So
I saw on Cap Friendly, I think the Edmonton Oilers right now have exactly $0 in free cap space, and they're projected to be at negative $3 million. I'm assuming because Cap Friendly thinks that Yamamoto will be signed. And I think $3 million is a good estimation for that type of player. I'm just looking at their lineup, and I just don't know where else they can shed cap space. Like, we'll give Ken Holland credit. This year, he did what he had to do in the offseason. He got rid of those 2 terrible contracts in those 2 goalies, right? He shed.
Well, they expired, and Mike Smith is hurt now.
Yes, fine. So I mean,
he kind of was lucky, but I mean, hey.
Not only that, too, the Duncan Keith deal
he retired.
Ended up working in his favor because they also got a cap, not penalty. What's the opposite of that?
So I think technically there's like a rule where they get a cap credit, but I don't think that's actually gonna end up happening.
So why? Do you know how that works?
I don't know. Gary likes to make rules on his own. Like, I don't know if that was like a commissioner's decision, but I think they're not actually gonna end up getting it. I just don't think they get a penalty. Which is kind of weird, but
regardless, though, they filled up their hole in net with Jack Campbell. I still think they're leaking a little bit defensively, and we'll talk about this soon. I hope to the hockey gods that Ken Holland goes out and gets Jakub Chychrun, but I mean, we can talk about that on another episode. But overall, yeah, I just don't know where they're going to shed cap space because there's literally no one else to take off this team because they're all on term.
Yeah, no, he had a bunch of cap space and he used it all instantly. I mean, I don't know if that's always the best strategy. I feel like sometimes what these GMs do is they use all their cap space and then try and squeeze RFAs because they have no leverage. I feel like that's a tactic that they have, but they need to keep Yamamoto. He's a huge piece of their top 6, I think.
Without a doubt. Actually, one thing I want to talk about too before we move on, it's coming to my mind now. I remember, and I mean, credit here, these are all just speculations from like credible Instagram pages and like Twitter analysts as well. There was some circulating rumor that Oilers players during the playoffs really didn't like Puljujarvi as a player because apparently they thought that once the puck came on his stick that the play died. Like that was a rumor. That was a rumor going around, but I mean that is all speculation, and his stats definitely say otherwise. You're right. He complements McDavid really well, and I just don't think they could have let him walk. Like, regardless of if Oilers fans would have been pissed off that he got signed, I think there would have been an uproar if they let him go.
Yeah, I mean, they would have traded his rights or something. I think they made a good call signing him. I think he's a pretty decent player. And he also was one of the worst finishers in the league. So there's another piece of like, he hasn't put up the numbers, but I'm hard pressed to think he's like one of the worst finishers in the league in reality. So if he regresses a little bit towards maybe what league averages and be putting up some more points, and maybe the Oilers fans will start, not all Oilers fans, but the Oilers fans who don't like him will start to come around on him.
I mean, for all of our loyal listeners, this kind of reminds me a little bit of the Jeff Skinner return to being a good player, where we talked about when a player is having a bit of a slump, one of the best indicators of them returning back to good performance-wise is having strong play driving and just lacking on finishing, because I mean, once you shore that up, you're back to being a 20-25 goal scorer. And if what you're saying is true, that Puljujarvi literally only can't finish and is still driving play quite nicely, that's probably the easiest fix you can have as a forward.
Just spend 3 months in the summer shooting pucks.
That's what I mean. And if that's the area of your game that you need to shore up, it's clearly not an effort problem. It's clearly not a play driving problem. I would be hard pressed to think that he isn't doing that.
Yeah, and they need luck too. Like he is. Maybe he gets his luck this year and has a great season. Who knows? Yeah. So you said he got drafted 3rd overall. Well, the guy who got drafted 2nd overall that same draft just signed maybe one of the not confusing. I just think this deal has the potential to be either one of the best or one of the worst in the league, and we'll know very soon if Patrik Laine lives up to this contract.
That was the same draft, really. He got drafted third after Matthews.
Laine, Puljujarvi.
Wow, I thought Puljujarvi was a lot younger.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so what are your first thoughts about the deal?
$8.7 million for 4 years is a lot for someone who plays zero, and I mean literally zero defense. He's probably one of the worst defensive players in the league. He clearly doesn't put effort in when the puck's not on his stick.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that will make this contract worth it is if he actually can live up to his goal scoring potential. Like, let's be real, if he scores 45 or 50 goals, which is possible playing with Gaudreau, no one cares about his lack of defense. But if you don't score and you suck defensively, you're getting paid over $1 million. That's a terrible, terrible contract.
Without a doubt. And we see a lot of players with this play style, like circa Nikita Kucherov, and on a lower scale, obviously, and I don't want to hear anyone clowning me that we make everything about the Leafs, but William Nylander is also fits in this play style as well.
I feel like Willie's better than him. I stand Willie, so
I mean relative to Nikita Kucherov.
Oh, okay.
If you, with these types of players, they are very, very susceptible to media scrutiny because you're right. When they don't score goals, their liabilities, both defensively and off the puck offensively, are so glaringly obvious that they're just so susceptible to media scrutiny. We see all the time people criticizing William Nylander for his play off the puck. Same with Nikita Kucherov for his play off the puck.
And Ovi when he was younger.
And Ovi when he was younger as well. So you're right. If he scores 50 goals, I mean,
no one cares.
No one cares. But yeah, to continue off of what you were saying, excuse me, and you mentioned this as well, that Patrik Laine is probably one of the best players on the power play in the league, but also one of the worst offensive players per dollar spent against the cap on 5-on-5.
He doesn't drive play at all, but if you get him the puck in the slot, there's a good chance he's going to score.
Without a doubt. When we look at these stats from Top Down Hockey, it's actually extremely weird to think that a former 40-goal scorer, he scored 40 one year, right?
I think in his rookie year, I'm not sure about that,
I think
actually.
He did, but let's call him a 35, 40-goal scorer. Has an expected value of offense 5-on-5 at 12th percentile in the league. It means 88% of forwards are better than him offensively at 5-on-5. But when the dude still scores 40 goals a year, that can only mean one thing, that he's phenomenal on the power play. And when you do some basic math and looking at his power play percentages last year, 56% of his goals were scored on the power play, and he was a combined -7. And I know plus minuses aren't the greatest stat to make, but all of these stats just point to the fact that this dude does damage on the power play.
Yeah.
And you got to hope that Columbus takes...
well, they're going to have a decent power play. They have Werenski, him, and Gaudreau. I think he's going to put up numbers. He scored a 38-goal pace last year, which isn't great, but he was a point a game. I'm giving him a few more goals with Johnny Gaudreau on his wing. If they play together, if they can find some chemistry, which I imagine they would. I would probably, if someone like set the over under at like 40, like 39.5, I'd probably be slamming an over.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I'll back him.
To your credit, you talked about this off air that Johnny Gaudreau is probably one of the better play drivers in the league. You said he was one of the best passers in the league.
And a great passer, yeah.
The stats back it up, which means that maybe this signing makes a little bit more sense because now they do expect him to go off on the power play.
Yeah, we got to wait a year or so to see. Like, if they were thinking, like, if they thought, okay, maybe we'll overpay on face value, but once we actually get these guys playing together, we're gonna have a good deal. Maybe.
Yeah, this deal also isn't terrible because it's Columbus. Like, once again, we talked about this. Columbus has such a problem securing unrestricted free agents. They need to overpay, and Patrik Laine is still in. Is he still in?
He was an RFA this year, but even like to keep an RFA, you got to entice them to stay because or else he's gonna take like a 2-year deal or, do maybe he doesn't maybe have the clout or the thing to pull a Matthew Tkachuk, but if they didn't offer him this money, he could have just been like, I'll take my qualifying offer and go to free agency kind of thing.
And this was also the perfect time to sign him too, because he even openly talked about it on air that this was he had never been so excited to start a season and to play hockey. Like when he said that they figured out that they signed Johnny Gaudreau like 3 a.m, and he was so excited. I mean, there's no other time a guy's more willing to commit long term when he's excited to play for the team. And yeah, when he's playing with one of the best play drivers in the league, I mean, 8.7 by 4, if he's going to score 40, I mean, I'll take that any day.
Especially with the cap going up in a couple of years, or I think you pay a 40-goal scorer that kind of money. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content. and find the link to our full podcast and all our socials in the description down below.
Also, don't forget to turn on those notifications to get live updates on new videos that we release.